Everybody, this is JP and Rohan, your non-geek, non-nerd hosts, and you're watching
Absolute Game of Nerd!
Rohan. Who's our guest today?
All right, we got another big guest with us. We have Vince of Comic Connect. I first met Vince personally at Emerald City Comic Con. He was selling some awesome books, and he let me take a picture with Action Comics 1, Superman 1, and Batman 1, and it was definitely the highlight of that convention for myself. And from there,
The best day of your life.
Yeah, I approached him about coming on the show, and here he is today, gracious enough to join us. Vince, say hello.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about comic books and anything you guys want to ask me about.
Yeah, so we obviously are going to talk about Comic Connect, but we always like to start with kind of an origin story. So take us to before Comic Connect. Where did your love of comic books kind of?
I was around 15 years old and I was bitten by a radioactive comic book. And after that, I had these incredible powers where I could buy and sell comic books relentlessly. Now, so my passion for comic books goes back all the way to before I could actually even read a comic book. I have very vivid memories of sitting down and looking at like comic books like Astonishing Tales with Deathlock. And I was learning to read, and he was always talking to something that wasn't in the panel. He was calling it pewter this and pewter that. Like, what's a pewter? And only years later did I realize he was talking to the computer that was in his head. So things like that. Ghost Rider. I remember looking at Ghost Rider number 19. It was one of the first comic books I ever had. And there was a big red demon-looking guy shooting rays at Ghost Rider as he was, or fire at Ghost Rider as he was on his motorcycle. And I remember sitting going, both these guys look like bad guys. What is going on in this comic book? And years later, I realized he's fighting the devil. That was the devil. And so it's like just interesting stuff like that. I remember Guardians of the Galaxy. I loved Yondu's fin, like the original way it looked in the comic books. I just love that. I loved the idea that each one of them was from a different planet, and they were the last survivors of their planet. And Martin X was kind of like Buck Rogers in this contained suit that he couldn't live without. And you had Martin X, you had Vance Astro. That's the one I'm thinking of. Sorry, Vance Astro was the one in the Buck Rogers character. Charlie 27, Yondu. And it's just these characters like just really stuck in my brain. I love this stuff. So you have me growing up in the 70s with two big brothers, Jerry and Sal, 10 and 11 years older than me. And I wanted to be like my big brothers. They loved comic books, so I was going to love comic books. And I cut my teeth on some of the best comic books ever written, in my opinion, of the modern era of comic books, if you consider the Bronze Age of modern era. At the time it was. So first Hulk I ever read were like 180, 181, and 182. That's a pretty cool way to start.
All right.
First X-Men I ever read were X-Men 95 to 100 and giant size number 1. My brothers could never get the 94. I remember my brothers had a beat up copy of Iron Man number 1. It was probably a good, and if I held it in my hands, I felt like I was holding the Ark of the Covenant. There's like a holy grail of holy grails. It was incredible. And it was probably worth $5 at the time, $10, who knows. But everything for me as a kid, anything superheroes, science fiction, monsters, all that type of stuff, I loved it. King Kong versus Godzilla. My mind exploded. I love this stuff. So, the holidays, they would always play those monster movies. And then there was, every once in a while, they'd have Monster Week on TV, and you get to watch like Gamera, Godzilla, King Kong, Rodan, or whatever it was. There's all these different monster movies, Mothra. So I love that stuff. I loved martial arts growing up. They had this thing in New York. I'm sure they had it around the country. Saturday afternoon drive-in, Saturday afternoon drive-in, and it would have this like weird 50s music at the intro. It was like bam, 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 and then martial arts flick would come on. So you have this culmination and combination of all these different pop culture genres mixing in my brain, and you could get all of that from comic books. You could get all the action, all the science fiction, the fantasy, the monsters, Conan the Barbarian. I remember seeing the movie Conan the Barbarian as a kid. I was probably, 1982? I think it was 11 years old when that came out. and just like sitting there going, oh my God, this, like, to me, it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. Still one of my all-time favorite movies. But you have all this stuff, and then, you know, for me, like getting a quarter, a nickel, scrounging through the couch in the house, looking through the couch for extra change, getting it together, and I could buy a comic book for 25 cents. Oh my God. And there were two stores. I grew up in Rockaway Beach in Queens in New York. And when I was a little kid, there was a luncheonette run by an old Chinese couple, really sweet people. It was like a real old school luncheonette where you could get an egg cream, and it had a spinner rack. And I would buy Marvel's like Fun and Games, where you could go through like a little maze in the comic book to get from one to the other. And Marvel team-ups and 2-in-1s were like big for me, because you get 2 superheroes for the price of 1. Oh my God, what a deal. And then there was a candy store called Allen's. And back when I was a little kid, this candy store had these little wooden, I guess, display racks, not racks, sorry, candy displays or candy holders. It was just like a wooden box with little compartments, and you could get candies for 2 cents a piece, 3 cents a piece, you know. And it's like, I was like a little kid, you know, I had 50 cents or $1, and I was the happiest kid in the world. I would get Marvel stickers with all the superheroes, Captain America coming forward like this, going, look, Ma, no cavities. These are the things I grew up on, and being able to like just save a little bit of money to get a comic book was a big thing. The other night I went into my personal collection, and I found the first Silver Age comic book I ever bought. I'll never forget this. My mom and I were driving back home, and we're driving through Queens, and there was I saw at the corner of my eye a comic book store called, I think it was called Big Apple Comics. And I went, Mom, stop the car. And she like hit up the brakes. She's like, what's going on? Did I hit somebody? She didn't know. I was like, no, there's a comic book store. Can I go? And she was like, oh, sure. She pulled over, and she was really nice. You know, I got out of the car. I went in there. I actually ended up looking around the store for a bit, and they had the glass displays, and I didn't really even know much about Silver Age comic books. And I saw X-Men number 12, and I was like, who's the Juggernaut? This looks really cool. And I was like, how much is that? I think it was $16, and I didn't have $16 at the time. It might have been 12, but I think it was 16. This is the era. I would think it was probably about 13 years old, 14, so early 80s. And I got back in the car, and I said, Mom, if I save up my money, will you bring me back here so I can buy that comic book? She said, sure, no problem. So I had some money saved up, and I did whatever chores I had to do, whatever it was to get some money together. And I remember like bringing in rolls of quarters and whatever the hell I could scrounge together, and went back there, and I took the money out of my pocket and laid it on the table, and I got that book. Still have it in my collection to this day. It's just so cool. So how did it all start? It all started in all those different places, and it was for me really like I'd sit and draw, and I'd watch Saturday morning cartoons. It was my favorite thing in the world to do. There was Davey and Goliath. I don't know if you guys ever see Davey and Goliath. It was like a Christian stop motion animation, and it was this kid Davey and his dog Goliath, but Davey and Goliath, you know, David and Goliath, and they had this really funny voices. And I remember I had a friend who would make fun of it, and he'd go, for your listeners out there who are old enough to remember this, you go, gee, Davey, you think the Lord will be mad at us? And it was just a funny thing, because like, they were always trying to do the right thing. And that's the dog talking to Davey. The dog could talk. It's really crazy stuff. So you have all this stuff, and it's building and building and building. And then, you know, you kind of, you hit puberty, and you discover girls, and you start dating girls, and then a girl breaks your heart, and you go, comic books never broke my heart. I'm going to go back to comic books. So I remember my buddy, Mark, who is about 5 years older than me. So I think it was around 14 years, around 19 years old. We'd start going into Manhattan to a great comic book store called Forbidden Planet, which is still in Manhattan. It's in a different location now. I think this is maybe the 3rd or 4th iteration or spot that it's in. Excuse me. So we would go in there, and he would buy books, and there was a basement like where they'd have the old books, and he would end up negotiating a deal and buying like X-Men 94, and I would like hang out with him, and it was fun. We'd go grab some pizza. And then as the years went on, I was collecting, I was in and out of it. And I remember we went back there once, and on this giant wall of all the new books that came in, there was the question. I think it was issue number, I'm going to say it was 13. The artwork is up on my wall. See the one right, hold on a second, right there, the guy's head's, hold on. That one.
Yeah.
Okay, so that one, and he's buried up to his neck, and they changed his mask, which makes him look like a faceless person, into a American flag. And it's like, wow, that's really cool. What happened to this guy? Why is he there? What's going on? And that was like the first book that got me back into it. And that was 1987, so I was around 16. So I'd gone in and out, and I was buying and selling. And my friend and I, we took an ad out in the Comic Buyer's Guide, which was back then a weekly newspaper about comic books. And you could find deals in the classified sections, in the sales sections. You have people who would buy and sell through this newspaper. Don and Maggie Thompson were the publishers, really nice people, fantastic. Maggie's still around. And so, yeah, we took a quarter page out in there, ad out, VM Comics, and between that and all of the people that I knew in school who knew I was into comic books, they would refer people they knew with comic book collections to me. I was kind of like the comic book kid in school. And then I also have this very, very vivid memory. One of my elementary school friends, kid named Kevin McCarthy, he ended up going to a different high school, but one day I was getting ready. I was waiting to go in to take the SATs. And I was waiting by the statue. I went to Beach Channel High School in Rockaway Beach, Queens. And all of a sudden I see Kevin. I said, hey, Kev, long time no see. How are you doing? Oh, I'm doing great. And I said, I remember you were a big comic book collector like me. He's like, yeah. It's like, any chance you want to sell your collection? And he looked me in the eyes and he said, yeah, I want to buy a guitar. So yeah, I want to sell my collection. I said, great. I remember he loved X-Men. So he had all the John Byrne and Dave Cockrum, Chris Claremont X-Men. So I went over his house and I bought his entire collection at the time for $400. And it was a big deal for me, and it was a big deal for him. It was just kind of cool. Like, wow, now I could read all the X-Men that I didn't get a chance to read. And it's a cool experience. And these are the things that kind of took me from one step to the other that I can remember. Really exciting for me. Then I was doing it all through college part-time. I went to St. John's University in New York City. And then after St. John's, I had this decision to make. It was really interesting. I was sitting there working out of my basement in a pair of boxers and making phone calls and buying and selling comic books. And I said, well, I went to school for marketing. I could hop on a train from Rockaway. It was an hour and 15 minutes at least each way by train. Wear a monkey suit all day. I'm sorry. At the time, I did not like wearing suits. I'm okay wearing suits nowadays, but not every day. So, or I could do that and probably make shit money, excuse my French, or I can work out of my basement apartment doing what I love, probably make double. And so I remember I set out my goals that day, and I said, okay, if I'm going to do this, I want to make X number of dollars out of school my first year. And I did that. And if I'm going to be in this business, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I want to be the biggest comic book dealer in the world. Those were my goals. That was 1993. And I started off, I was selling comic books on the streets of Manhattan. And I met a guy at a comic book convention in Brooklyn that I just happened to go to. And somebody answered and said, hey, Vin, my buddy Kurt, you live in Rockaway. He lives in Rockaway. Could you give him a ride? I was like, sure. I didn't know there was another comic book guy in Rockaway. So sure, I'll check him. Hey, Kurt, how you doing? We get in the car. And he says, hey, you should start coming with me out to Manhattan. We could sell on the streets together. And I was like, really? You can make money selling comic books in the streets of Manhattan? Yeah, I do pretty well. I said, okay. So the next day, I put my boxes of books and a couple of card tables and his boxes into my car. We drive into the city. We set up on Broadway between John and Maiden Lane, John Street and Maiden Lane in the financial district downtown. And the first day I make $50. And, you had to park the car, you had to pay the tolls, you had to pay gas, and then you have to actually work. And we worked from about 10 to 3. I'm like, Kurt, what are you doing? What are you bringing me out here for? We just wasted my whole day. I made $50. He said, take it easy. He said, they're going to have to get to know what you have. And once they do, they'll spend more money with you. Oh, okay. The next day, we went out there. I made $60. I said, hey, Kurt, what are you doing, man? I'm making $60. It costs like $30, maybe more to park the car and get in here. He says, take it easy. Give them a little time to get to know what you have, and then things will get better. The third day, I made $200. I said, hey, Kurt, thanks for taking me out here. This is great. So we would drive out together, and I did this all summer. What was, for me, the best part of it were the hours, working from 10 to 3. I'd get back to Rockaway, I'd unload the car. I'd put on a pair of shorts, walk up to the beach, because I grew up by the beach. My buddies would be playing a few blocks over from my block, and we'd be playing beach volleyball. So I'd play beach volleyball from about, let's say, 4:30 till about 8:30 at night, then go home, eat dinner, go to sleep, and rinse and repeat. And the next day I was out there on the streets. And I did that for an entire summer. And it was a blast. It taught me a lot about selling. It taught me a lot about hustling. It taught me a lot about paying my dues and how hard it can be to make a living. And, sometimes it started raining in the middle of the time you're out there and you're like, I did that up until when it got cold. After that, I was basically middlemaning warehouses of books and doing conventions and doing mail order. And that's kind of the beginning. Those are the early days of my career.
So real quick on that note, when you're selling on the street, you're legitimately on the sidewalk, like comic books in hand, kind of just waving people down.
So I had 2 card tables, fold out card tables like you would play poker on, right? And I bring 8 boxes and put the 8 boxes on top of my card table. And people would walk by and look through my boxes like a convention. Huh. And it was weird because it would be anybody who's walking by. It just so happens there had been a comic book store around the corner called Bulletproof Comics. And I guess people who were going there would come by us afterwards. And all the people coming out of Wall Street would come by. So we sold to finance guys. It was a blast. It was so cool. I have a very weird, vivid memory of, I don't have many regrets in my life, but, I was a young single guy at the time, and this stretch limousine pulls up right where so I'm selling to the public, and behind me, a stretch limousine pulls up on the street, and stops, and the window is rolled down, and there's this beautiful, beautiful blonde Latina, and she's looking at me. And I just smile and I go back to selling my comic books. And I was like, if I knew then what I know now, maybe I would have said, Kurt, you need to drive the books home today. I'm going for a ride. Who knows? But, those are the types of crazy, weird things that would happen on the streets of Manhattan. And the best day I ever had out there, I remember I brought out a Punisher miniseries run, the beginning of a Punisher regular run, and the McFarlane Spider-Mans, and I think that day I did 700 in sales, and it was thrilling for me. Like, to imagine, I went into Manhattan for 5 hours, and made $700 was huge.
So in that time, are you still sourcing comic books as you were back in high school? You were still just the comic book guy that people called and said, "Hey,
yeah." So I was buying collections. I was out there on the weekends. I wouldn't go to the city because it was a business. People who were out there for work and business were there. The weekends it was tourists. So we didn't really. At least I didn't sit up on the weekends. I was doing conventions on the weekends as well. So yeah, I was buying collections. I was meeting people at conventions, and it was I look back very fondly on a lot of those moments, and even those early days of driving up to Boston for a convention, waking up at the crack of dawn and driving 3 hours, or leaving the night before and driving 3 hours, and then leaving after the one-day show. And my first Chicago Comic-Con in July 4th weekend, missing the 4th of July. All my friends were hanging out at the beach in Rockaway, and here I was in Chicago doing business instead. And when I've talked about this with friends of mine that I grew up with, they've said to me many times, like, "Hey, we were all hanging out drinking beer, and you were building a business." And in fact, one of my buddies who's a captain on the fire department, his name's Chris. We were in the car a few days ago, and he was telling our wives, he said, he used to help me at conventions. I said, "Hey," to his wife, "did you know he used to help me?" And she's like, "Yeah, he's told me." And he said, even back then as a kid, you were in your own element. You took to it like very strong, considering you were basically surrounded by guys who were basically, 10, 20 years older than you for the most part. And I was like the new kid on the street, and I was like, oh, that's really nice of you to say. I never thought about it, because for me, it was just doing what I had to do, and also what came naturally to me. And I'm not trying to puff myself up. I'm just saying that I love what I do, and I think that's part of the reason I'm good at what I do. I love buying. I love selling. I love marketing, promoting. I love the source material, the things that I'm selling. I love the stories. I love what this stuff represents in terms of an art form. And to me, one of the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest art form created in this country. That's my opinion. And so I'm not trying to say, I don't believe in the adage where they say, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. I think that's bullshit. I work my ass off, and I still work my ass off. I've been doing this for over 30, I would say 37 years now. And I work harder today than I think I ever have. I also try to work smarter, and I try to delegate, of course. But, last week I had a potential 7-figure deal, and I probably spent no less than 5 solid hours on a phone. And it didn't turn into the 7-figure deal I was trying to do, but it turned into another 7-figure deal, which I was very excited about. I'm not at liberty to say what it was, but yes, maybe one day we'll be able to promote it, but a new world record was set over last weekend. I'm very excited about it. So yeah, you have all this different stuff going on, and at the same time, I was also, like I said, it was the height of the comic book boom, and I was finding warehouses of books, and then I would take the warehouse, let's say 50,000 books, buy it at 8 cents a piece, sell it at 9 cents a piece, buy it at 8 cents a piece, sell it for 10 cents a piece, buy it at 7 cents a piece, sell it for 15 cents a piece. I had, whatever I could put together. But back then there was just tons and tons of material, comics that weren't selling. And what did the guys that I was selling it to, what did they do with it? They were packaging it. So whenever you were in a store, well, maybe not Costco wasn't around back then, but like BJ's was around, Walmart's, Kmart's, Woolworth, 3 comic books for $1. If you bought those in the 90s, that was me. In fact, I actually was able to, an extra hand. I was able to piece together a deal in I'd say probably around 2005 with Toys R Us. Whenever Iron Man, maybe 2000, I don't know if it was, whenever Iron Man 2 came out.
2011 or something.
Maybe it was that, yeah. And basically, I had Metropolis bagged comic books in Toys R Us. And by the way, it was a stack of paperwork that we had to complete to be able to sell through Toys R Us. They want to make sure they're not dealing with, some clown who's not going to be able to fulfill an order. We also did another deal like that with another company beforehand. And like, to me, that was a new challenge. That was something like, I'm going to sell comic books to Toys R Us. That's pretty freaking cool. So, for me, it's always been about, how do I say this? Hearing that little voice in your head, or even hearing it from somebody else saying, that can't be done, that's not possible. That always got my gears going, and I wanted to make it possible. So to me, like when I got out of college and I was doing comic books full time, and I'd go to a party and meet a girl, I started chatting with her. If you're in New York, it's always going to be, oh, what's your name? Where do you live? What do you do for a living? I sell comic books. That's really funny. No, really, what do you do for a living? No, I sell comic books. Really? Now, there were 2 things that happened at that point. Either she walked away, which definitely happened, or she asked, can you make a living doing that? I said, I'll do all right. These were the early days. And it didn't really go over very well. It wasn't the biggest thing. Sometimes I was smart enough not to talk about what I did, and get some action.
But, they like to talk about themselves. So better just to turn that to them.
So I think it's fairly safe to say that you've paid your dues, you've grinded your way to where you're at. How does the transition work from street hustling, we'll say, to one of the biggest auction and probably one of the, if not the most well-known vintage comic dealer out there? Like,
wow.
Is it just you just grew and grew and grew, or was there how did this all come about?
That first of all, that's very kind of you to say. Thank you. I don't know if that's true, but maybe I'm up there. So let me see. So by the way, being a convention dealer, which I'm still a convention dealer at heart, that's hustling too. You're always hustling. And I grew up with an entrepreneurial spirit because that's something I believe my father instilled in me. I remember at an early age, my father said to me, ownership was key. And so I think that kind of made it seem very possible that I watched my dad. My dad was an immigrant. My parents came from Italy and started out with nothing. Then they moved to America. They were sleeping on lawn furniture in a cousin's basement. And one day they saw a rat in the basement. And the next day my dad went out and got them an apartment. And that was the end of that. He started off as a dishwasher and moved his way up to pizza man, and then after that, the butcher, and then the cook, and then he opened his own pizzeria, and then he opened his own restaurant. And the dishes that my dad has made over the decades, even now, my father is 96 years old, still cooks. He made me a chicken cacciatore a few weeks ago that, oh my God, the leftovers.
You've recently posted some photos of some food you've eaten recently, like I think you went home to Italy or something.
Yeah, I was in Italy, and then my wife and I love to cook. A lot of people who follow us on social media, or follow me on social media, I should say, will see a lot of the things that I cook and make, and my father cooks, and we do videos together. And I don't really think my dad knows how big a star he is on the internet because people just love his videos.
Oh yeah, you posted one of him. It was fantastic. I can't remember what it was he was saying, but the one recently, it was great.
He's got a lot of energy, and he instilled into me this idea of entrepreneurial spirit and that I could do these things. And my mother also was the consummate hostess. Whenever we had people at our house, you couldn't get in the house within 2 minutes. Are you hungry? Do you want to eat? And my mom would make something great. She'd whip something up and like that, and you'd be like, oh my God, that's the best pasta I've ever had in my life. So, and my mother instilled in me the idea that you could accomplish anything in your life that you set your mind on, as long as you're willing to work hard enough for it. And my dad also taught me that knowledge was power. I had some really great lessons that were taught to me and instilled in me. And then as I got older, I started finding other role models and mentors that I could take different things from their teachings and utilize in my life. For instance, I am a huge Bruce Lee fan. I studied his martial art Jeet Kune Do as a teenager, and my introduction to Eastern philosophy was through his books, The Tao of Jeet Kune Do. Absorb what is useful. In fact, I keep on my desk his very first edition Chinese Kung Fu. And so I'll show you guys real quick. One of my favorite collectibles that I own is Bruce Lee's only signed movie contract.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I'm a huge Bruce Lee fan, and some of the things that he taught were absorb what is useful, discard what is not. Your limitations are limitless. A lot of people coin it like be like water. That's become really big over the last years. But a lot of times you have to realize that what he means by that is like water takes the form of whatever it's in, or it can be crashed down with incredible force, and that's how you have to be in life. You have to basically mold yourself to the situation. And when you need to be hard, you're hard. When you need to be gentle, you're gentle. And when you need to be this way, you go this way. And then you find other ways. So I think I utilized a lot of that stuff. And when I got out of college, I was hustling. I was at conventions. I was doing the working in the city, in the streets. I was middlemaning these warehouses of books. By the way, the biggest warehouse I ever saw was the warehouse left by the famous Moondogs chain of comic book stores from Chicago, and it was a room filled with 1 million comic books. I was climbing up boxes of comic books to get to the top to try to just see what was in there. And oh my God, did they over order on a ton of Image and Valiant stuff and Marvel. That was the implosion. That was like, holy crap! We actually ended up selling that room of 1 million books. So again, my goal was to be the biggest comic book dealer. There were so many guys I couldn't figure out how to beat. How am I going to beat these guys? They get more money, more experience, more network, more everything. So I went back and looked at what did my parents do. My parents were incredible at, in a certain way, whether it was at home or at the restaurant, customer service. My father was a chef. He was owned the restaurant. He was a chef, but he'd come out in the middle of the evening and sit and talk with people, buy them a glass of wine, chat with them for a bit, and they loved this. My mom at home would have people over. Before they knew it, they were having a great meal, having great conversation, and that's the type of thing that I said, I can do that in a different way in my business. And so it's always been one of the foundations of how I believe my company has been successful. Now, I don't want to paint a picture like that. I don't believe in the old adage either that the customer is always right. Sometimes the customer is wrong. Sometimes, and you have to tell them when they're wrong. But for the most part, you try to help and you try to make a situation better. And so I utilized that. I saw it as something that was lacking in the collectibles market. I think a lot of the comic book dealers, especially the older ones, you might see this still to this day at conventions. Some of them are like these grumbly, kind of curmudgeon-y, miserable. You know what I mean?
And with JP and I talk about these people all the time on the show.
And look, it's like, hey, I don't know. I could be doing something I hate. I'm at a comic book convention, selling comic books, hanging out with people who have similar interests, and meeting incredible people from all over the world. I think the same show I met you at, I met a collector from Japan. I couldn't believe it was so cool. We sat down and he spoke some English and we went back and forth about stuff. And I looked up some words in Japanese so I could explain certain things. And it was just amazing.
No, I mean, I went to a con this past weekend out here in the Washington area. And, when I met you at Emerald City Comic Con, I approached you. You were immediately, we went behind the table. We're pulling Superman 1 off the rack, blah, blah. We're looking at this book, and it was great. I go this weekend, and there's a guy there, for instance, he built basically like a wall with his boxes and then his wall, and you could not go back there. And it's just like, and it was so far, like you couldn't even see the prices on the books. You had to like talk to be like, hey, what? And it's like, what is the point of like, why are you doing this? Like, this is supposed to be fun. And you're just like extracting all of that out of it.
Who are all these people?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It just drives me crazy when I see that. And I'm just like, there's a better way to do this.
Yeah. So fast forward, I had a really awful thing happen to me at a convention in New York. It's, I think, 1996. It was April 2nd. If April 2nd of 1996 was a Sunday, that's the year it was. End of the day, I was trying to always save money, and I would borrow a friend's van. My friend who I met through the comic book business, he had a junkyard in Brooklyn, Auto Gobbler. It was my friend Joe, and he had this old van that he used to move automotive parts around, and it was covered in grease. So I would put cardboard down, put my boxes on the cardboard, and drive carefully into the city. But at the end of the day, this van did not have keys that locked. So I was trying to leave the convention, bring my books down, and I said, where are my best boxes of books going to be safer? In the convention under a table or in an unlocked van in the middle of Midtown Manhattan? I'm going to leave the convention. I asked a friend named Brad Savage, who is a dealer who's still around, dealer collector, could you please watch my stuff? I went down with the first load, came back upstairs, looked under my table, and my boxes were gone.
Oh.
And I thought April 2nd, maybe somebody's playing a April Fool's joke on me. I went up to Brad, who had his back to where my boxes were. I said, Brad, I asked you to watch my boxes. I am watching your boxes. So how the fuck are you watching my boxes with your back to them? Well, and that day I was in tears because I had no insurance and I lost the four most valuable boxes of comic books they had. Many of them were, some of them were consignment, and some of them I had closed the deal on the night before and still hadn't even sent out the check for it. And I still had to make good on it. Probably, I'd say somewhere around $40,000 worth of books. Needless to say, I was pretty depressed for quite some time. And I had a great friend, Mike Carbonaro, who many people know in the business. He said to me, he said, I know things look bad right now, but my dad has a saying, every dark cloud has a silver lining. Something good will come of this. And I remember hearing that, and it stuck with me. And I was still pretty down about it. And for about a month, I was like miserable. And eventually, one day I woke up and I said, if I keep acting like this, then this guy really stole something from me. I said, and I vowed that day, it was like out of a comic book, from this day forward, I will work 10 times harder, 10 times smarter, 10 times faster. And I just got to work. I pulled out all my leads. I made every freaking call I could make that day. And I just called and finding deals and looking around and calling people and handing out flyers at shows about the books that got stolen from me, offering a reward. And it took me about 3 months to get back to break even and pay everybody off that I had to pay off and get my business up and running. I had to go into my personal collection and sell off books that just to have something on my walls. And I did that, and it taught me something. It taught me resilience, and it also taught me that any obstacle I face in my life, I can overcome. If I could beat this, I can beat anything. And then the silver lining comes, more so than what I just told you. Out with a bunch of comic friends, and a friend out for dinner, and a friend of ours meets us after dinner. And he says, hey, Vin, would you like to buy some of these books? I just came up from Florida and I want to sell them. And I said, oh, sure. And it was a really high-grade Silver Age. And my right-hand man at the time, Bob Storms, who owns highgradecomics.com, he was my right-hand man. He used to be a customer. And then he once asked me, do you need any help? And I said, really? You want to help me? And he's like, yeah. So Bob started being my helper at conventions and eventually went out on his own. And he's been doing great since. And basically, Bob looks at the books he had consigned to me. He had consigned books to me, looks at these books, and he said, these are the books that were stolen from me, from you. I went, oh, shit. And I said to Mark Haspel, who's one of the biggest, one of the graders at CGC now. Mark Haspel, incredible guy, incredibly knowledgeable. I said, Mark, these are stolen from me. I don't want you to lose, but can you tell me how much you paid for them? And I'll pay you that, but I would really like to have them back because I already paid Bob out. And so I was now paying double for these books. But I wanted to have them back. I felt like it was important. And he understood, and he was very kind, and he sold them to me. And because of that interaction, I think about a year later, he came up to New York with a suitcase filled with 1950s horror books that were incredible. And I didn't have that much money, but I bought what I could. And I said, you should really show these to my buddy Steve Fishler of Metropolis Collectibles. And Mark knew who Steve was. He said, oh, that's a good idea. I'll go there next. So I told Steve Mark was coming by. And I get a call from Steve after Mark got there. He says, Vin, we need to buy all of these books. And I said, Steve, I don't have that type of money. It's great. I sent them over to you. He said, no, I'll lay out the money for you and we'll split the deal. Don't worry about it. I appreciate you bringing me this deal. I was like, wow, that was really nice. And so if I didn't get ripped off, I wouldn't have gotten this first chance at these books, which ended up being the Spokane Collection, which is one of the greatest pedigrees, in my opinion. The condition is just spectacular. And what ended up happening is we kept begging Mark to go after the rest of his collection, and he didn't. And then somebody else who knew about it came to us with the lead and said, hey, do you want this lead? And we said, well, look, Mark's not getting back to us. Okay. And we pursued it from there, and we ended up buying the rest of the collection. We had to fly down to New Orleans, I believe it was. And then we were in a hotel room in New Orleans and bought 2 long boxes of books, Golden Age Batman's, horror books, classics. There were so many really cool books in this collection. And then that led to me and Steve becoming partners. So all the business we were doing together, including that one, led, like a year later, he called me up and said, hey, Vin, you have time to get a drink in Manhattan? I said, sure. I came into the city. He was on 18th and Broadway. We were at a restaurant called America. They had dishes, I guess, from every state, something like that. It was really fun. And he said to me, he said, listen, I'm thinking about getting married. I'm thinking about having a family. I'm looking for someone to become my partner. And you're the only person that I really know that thinks the same way I do about business. And I was like, wow, that's quite flattering coming from Stephen Fishler, and just flattering in general. And I said, wow, I'd like to think about this. This could be interesting. He and I got along great. Not only were we great business colleagues, we had become very close friends, best friends. And so we ended up taking our time trying to figure out how do you combine this gigantic company with my much smaller company into one company. And we had to get creative. We figured out a way to make it happen. It took us about a year to get the contract ready and done, or something like that. And in July 1st of 1999, we merged companies. And this July 1st, next week, or this week, is it this week? Next week, Saturday?
Yeah, Saturday.
Saturday will be 24 years that we've been partners.
Wow, that's amazing.
So our partnership has lasted longer than his first marriage and my first marriage combined. That's pretty bizarre. And believe me, we're very different people. Anybody who meets us would know that in 2 seconds. He's much more of an introvert. I'm much more of an extrovert. He can sit down and grade comic books for 8 hours, 10 hours straight. I can barely look at comic books, and I'd rather be on the phone doing deals. So, I love to grade comic books, but I'd love to talk and put deals together. So we merged companies in July 1st of 1999. And I think it was within a year or two, we actually started a production company, and we sold our first TV show called what became known as it's first called Monsters Wanted, and it became the wrong coast. Shoot. Yes, the wrong coast. Left coast, west coast, west coast. Yeah, the wrong coast. It was called the wrong coast. Stop motion animation TV show. We sold it to AMC on our first pitch. We had a great team of people working with us. Writers. We had Mark Hamill from Star Wars as one of our voiceover guys. He was heading up the voiceover team.
Wow.
Billy West, Carl Paolino on the animatronics and stop motion, and Bob Underwood was our head writer. And then what happened? We sold the show, and then the guy who bought it at AMC, I think he got fired or left. And the new guy, they usually you lose your show at that point, but Bob was able to rework the show into a stop motion animation sketch comedy show in which you'd have like a courtroom scene with Tom Cruise and Tom Hanks. Who's the nicer Tom? And they would, get up there and argue their case. And it was really cute and funny. Like, what if Woody Allen was Spider-Man? Oh God, these webs! I don't know what's going to happen. So you have all these situations that we were kind of growing, and we thought maybe goodbye comic books, hello Hollywood. That didn't quite happen. But we also came up with a video game concept called Hunter Nation. We try to get creative and have fun with things. But eventually went back to the core of our business, and continued growing the business. And I think the next big milestone for us was 1997, which took me 2 years to convince my partner that we should have our own auction company, because we were losing so much business to eBay and to other auction companies. And so he
So
didn't.
actually, can I ask you a question real quick? So prior to the auction house, so you mentioned that Steve Fishler is a bit of an introvert, or we have all seen you out on Instagram and things. So I have heard of Steve Fishler because of the video that's out there with the Nicolas Cage Action 1 comics story. Is that story pre-merger or post-merger?
The finding it, the book.
Yeah, and then like
That was post merger. He sold it to him. He sold it to him before we merged, but we found it together. Yeah.
Because then that also then sold on eBay, correct?
Nope, sold through Comic Connect.
Oh, okay. I thought there was an actual one that did sell through eBay.
2.2 million.
There you go.
So in 1997, we start Comic Connect. We couldn't give our services away. I remember the first 6 months, we'll sell you comic books for free. And we were getting very little traction. And then one day we got a call from a gentleman in San Francisco. He said, hey, I have cancer. I have this great comic book collection. I'd rather leave the money to my kids than leave the comic books. And I'm looking to do something with them. So we found out that there was an Action 1 in the collection. We flew out the next day, got there, did the deal, put the Action 1 6.0 into our auction. It sold for then what was a record $317,000, and now we were on our way. We just made a big sale, and so after that, the consignments started coming in, and that was great. And we built our business from there in 1997 with Comic Connect, and then wait, did I say 1997? 2007. Yeah. Sorry, 2007. That wouldn't make any sense. 2007. Apologies. And then from there, you had the was that the Great Recession? Yeah, Great Recession.
2008,
right?
2000. Yeah.
And so you had the world turning upside down. Real estate turned into a nightmare. Putting your money in the bank, you couldn't make any interest. The stock market was a shit show. So you had all those situations, but what was good? Collectibles, comic books. And we saw comic books starting to go up. It was great. So we were riding this wave, and we sold our first $1 million comic book. It was an Action Comics #1, 8.0. I believe it was 2010. And right after we sold it, we got a call from a customer who said, hey, why didn't you sell that to me? I was like, okay, hold on a second. We went out and found another one. And I remember Heritage had just broke our $1 million sale with Detective 27. I think sold for 1.375, and then a week or two later, we closed the deal on what was an 8.5 Action 1 for $1.5 million.
Nice.
So these are really thrilling times for me. I remember I flew down to Florida for business, and I was on the phone with my client who had bought the 8.5, and he wanted what's the best copy of Amazing Fantasy? And we had actually sold it to a client. It was a 9.6. This was when it was 1 of 1.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said to him, he said, well, what would it cost? I said, I don't know. And he said, how about offer him $500,000? I said, okay. Called up the owner, and I said, hey, would you sell your AF-15 for $500,000? He said, nope. I said, okay. I said, I'm not saying I can do this, but if I could get you $1 million, would you sell it? And I remember there was this pause, and he said, well, if I sold it for $1 million, I could donate that money to charity and use that as a write-off. I'm listening to this, I'm like, oh my God, this guy lives in a completely different world than I live in. Because I'd say, can I have that in singles? And then I'd throw it on my bed and I'd jump up and down in it for like the whole day. But he said he would. So I called up the buyer and I said, this is the situation. It's a very aggressive price. I would like to make 10% on it, so it'll be 1.1 to you. What do you think? Without missing a beat, he was like, buy it. And that was
Wow.
how I sold the most expensive Silver Age comic book ever sold at that point.
Wow.
So I was really thrilling, making that deal happen, doing it in a hotel room, going back and forth on the phone. And this is, again, what I love to do. I love putting deals together. I love going from point A to point Z and getting the deal done and making people happy too.
This is a great lead up to a question I was going to ask you. So obviously you guys have a well-known reputation, so people do come to you with what they have to sell. But like when you hear these historic finds, like recently this DC collection that just came out with every book on the newsstand, or
that's not a historic find.
Oh,
okay, let me just give you the background on that. And what I mean by that collection has been around for a long time. I helped the original owner of that collection pieced it all together. He's out of England. I helped him with a ton of books he bought for that collection.
Okay.
It's not an original owner. It's not. I'm not trying to diminish that. It's a great collection. I'm just trying to get the facts straight because somebody a couple of days ago asked us through social media, "Hey, do you know where that Mint collection, DC collection, is going?" Mint collection.
Yeah.
Every key is restored, and that's okay. Yeah. And most of it's, I'd say, average grade is BG. It's an amazing collection. I would have killed to have gotten it back and sold it. It's fantastic. And the guy who does have it and is bringing it to market is a really nice guy, Ivan Briggs at a PBA Galleries. I'm sure it'll be a great success. He's a swell guy. I just used the word swell. He's a great guy, and I'm sure it'll go great. But it's not like an original owner or a find. Yeah. It's been around.
My question though was, so obviously you have books that people bring to you, but are you out there? You're also out there then competing to get.
Oh yeah, compete every day. I compete every day, and I love competing because I believe when I'm on the phone with somebody or in person, if they listen to what I have to say and they understand what my company has to offer and who's going to represent them in the marketplace, if they're consigning to me, I think pound for pound, we are the best company in the world to auction your comic books through. And we're damn good at doing artwork, VHS, video games, pulps, movie props, toys, statues. And we're going to, in our next auction, we're going to have some incredible letters from Jerry Siegel to the publisher of DC Comics, Jack Leibowitz, basically chewing him out and telling him, "I'm going to haunt you from my grave. You cheap mother. You didn't give me enough money for Superman. You ripped me off." And you know, historically speaking, these letters are unbelievable. But every day I'm competing. And in fact, about a month ago, I heard about this amazing collection that two guys found from the West Coast, Jamie and Felipe from Flipmode Comics, and they post great stuff on Instagram. And I got on the phone with them, and we talked for extensively about the collection. And I had known them a little bit from shows and stuff, being on the West Coast. And by the time I was finished, we had this great conversation. They said they needed to think about it. And I was competing against other auction house companies, ones that you know. And they called me up a few days later, and they called me up and said, "Hey, could you help us to get books graded?" And I said, "Guys, whether you do it through me or not, sure. Let me know how I can help. No problem." And then the very next day, they called me up and said they wanted to consign the collection to me. And I was thrilled, not only because obviously I run a business, we want to make money, but I was thrilled because this is a really great collection and very special. And being able to bring that to my customers is half the battle. Because if you don't bring interesting stuff to market, you don't have people coming back to you. So, but also it was really meant a lot to me that these guys trusted me and my company to market and promote their collection. And we've already got on social media. We got the books in, the first batches of books in, and they are so much fun. It's a great collection. We just got the PEP 22 in, Captain America 46 and 6.0. Wow. All Select 1 in 7.0. Really beautiful colors. A Chamber of Chills 19. There's so many good books in there, man. It was like so much fun. Wait, there was one more. There's a big key sensation number 1, 6.0. Really great stuff.
With this kind of in mind, you've already discussed multiple books you've kind of sold for $1 million plus, so on and so forth. So we all saw last week, and I'm not asking you to talk badly about anyone, but we all saw the Superman 1 that sold for $1 million less than it did a year ago. Do you find that this market for this big a book has diminished then, or how do you see the market currently for books of this size?
No, I think that if that book had been in our auction, it would have done incredibly well. I believe that wholeheartedly. And I'm not trying to say anything bad about anybody else. I'm just saying that our venue is the right venue for that book.
Okay.
And I would just say the proof is in the pudding. Look at the results. We've had books in our last auction that sold for record prices a year ago. We had a Suspense Comics number 11, CGC graded 9.8 from the Promise collection, sold for $135,000 at the height of the pandemic craziness. We put it in our auction, we sold it for $147,000.
Wow.
Now, I'm not saying every single book we've done better with. I'd be BSing you if I said everything we do. Any auctioneer who tells you everything they do is the best and they're the winner all the time, don't auction with those guys. they're not telling you the truth, because look, it's an auction. There's risks at stake here. There's money at stake, and you never know who's going to show up. And that's why, again, I believe that our company is so good at this, because we don't stop trying to get people bidding until the last damn minute, last damn second. I'm sitting there texting customers. Have you taken a look at this book? What about this book? What about that book? My guys are on the phones calling people day in and day out. We're sending out smoke signals. Whatever we have to do, we're trying to get people interested and excited. We're pursuing publicity. We're getting on TV shows, on radio shows, on podcasts. We're doing everything in our power to get the word out as much as humanly possible. And it's something that I don't just do it because I want to make money. It's not the thing. I take what I do very seriously, and I have a tremendous feeling of, if somebody trusts me to sell their valuable collection, that's not a joke.
Yeah.
That means that they believe in us, that they trust us, and I want to do everything in my power to make sure that their trust is well founded and will result in a win for them. Now, we don't win every time for people. That's nonsense, and that's just the way the market is. And right now we're dealing with a very strange market that's in flux. But overall, when you're talking about the strongest part of the market, which is the golden age market, you're seeing a lot of really good material selling at great prices. There's a lot of stuff happening right now in the background and privately that who knows, maybe it'll become public soon, but some very big stuff. I'm working on some very big stuff right now.
Yeah, so this is actually also another kind of lead up to what I wanted to ask. So, you watch various people on the Comic Book Folk on all the various YouTube channels, and you hear these kind of stories. Like right now, we're in this kind of period of time where, especially with kind of the baby boomer generation that is kind of not trying to sound morbid, but kind of passing on. And a lot of these collections are really starting to come out of we had a Drew from Como Comics. He says, right now in the Midwest, comic book collections are just falling out of the sky. Do you foresee this next 5-10 years that we're about to see some just unbelievable movement in this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but it sure seems like the last few years have been some amazing collections, very big collections, and I hope there's a lot more stuff out there. It's so hard to believe that there still is, these original owner collections out there, and it's thrilling. I have a lot of fun doing this and finding stuff, and it's kind of like we're comic book hunters. We're trying to find those hidden treasures.
Yeah. So then, would you say if you were a betting man, right? You talked about the 9.6 AF-15. There are two 9.6 AF-15s, if I remember correctly, right?
I think there's three. No, okay. There's four.
Okay.
There's four 9.6s, 5 9.4s. It might even be 6 9.4s at this point.
Would you bet that there could be a 9.8 out there that hasn't been found?
It's a great question. Anything is possible. I always love seeing, thinking about that CGC has been around for 23 plus years, and there's still stuff coming out of the woodworks.
Yeah.
So could there be a 9.8? There could. A book that's even tougher is Hulk #1. There's only 194.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
There's 3 9.2s. I own one of them.
I saw. I saw when you were on Josh's comics, Big Boy Books of the Week. I saw you got some big boy stuff, no doubt.
Yeah, it was really funny. I took a bunch of pictures, and then he said, "Hey, do you want to do this?" I'm like, "Wow, I actually have all these pictures already in my phone. Sure thing, no problem." And it was fun. And I remember he was telling me, or somebody was telling me, that there were guys shitting on me, the fact, like, as if I was doing something wrong for sharing my comic collection with people. And some of my friends, I guess, who were online, shut these guys down, these trolls or whatever.
Well, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I'd much rather have someone like you sharing your collection than hiding it behind a closed vault and never seen the light of day. Well, like, I love it. I
appreciate that, but I think part of it is also that they are like, oh, this guy's just showing, this rich guy is showing off his expensive books. Hey, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. Yeah. I started my business with $600 in my bank account. I used to take loans from my parents. They helped me out. I paid them back. I paid rent. I busted my ass. I went to school. I worked through school. Anybody who has that type of opinion of me, they don't know me, and they don't know what I'm all about. I'm the first guy to roll up his sleeves to get his hands dirty, and I'll stay as late as possible. I was in the office last night till 10:30. My publicist got me a cool interview, and it was a written interview, and I wanted to make sure I did a great job with it. And so I sat there for an hour and answered every question the best I could. And now tonight I'm here with you guys. 2 days ago on Monday, I did a 2.5 hour interview for a documentary about comic books. Had a great time. There's nothing I like to talk about more, as you guys probably can tell. You guys have maybe asked me 2 or 3 questions. I've just gone, blah, 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 blah. And, I can't stop. But that's literally, that's how passionate I am about what I do. I love this stuff. I mean, I'll just show you like some funny stuff that I have sitting here. Like I saw this heavy metal. It's like, super cool. Lord of Light. This is Jack Kirby Designs. What is the company called? It's 777. What is the company called? Super 7. Like, and this is so cool. I love this. What's it worth? I don't know. Is it worth $10? I don't know. I just love it. It's in my office. I got this piece. This is really cool. So hold on, check this out. You can see that, right?
Oh yeah, I heard you tell the story on Swag's podcast with Mike Tyson.
Yeah, so I can tell real quick. I'm at an event. I get to meet Mike Tyson. My friend who's running the event says, "Hey Mike, this is the Mike Tyson of comics." And I started laughing. I'm like, "Shit, I don't want to piss off Mike Tyson." And he goes, "Oh, I like comics." And I was like, "Oh wow, that's really cool." That's not a good impression of Mike. but he said I like comics, and I said, "Oh really?" I said, "Who's your favorite comic book character?" And without missing a beat, he just looked at me. He went, "Apocalypse." And I was like, "Wow, he kind of looks like Apocalypse. That's crazy." Like imagining that his favorite character is this bad guy. And he was, I believe, he was enjoying himself at the party. They were licensed his image to sell rolling papers. And I asked him, I said, on his way out, I said, "Mike, could you sign this?" And we had the little cutout like you do, if you're a signature series guy. And he says, "Sure, no problem." And he grabs it and he starts writing. And somebody calls his attention and he writes on it this way. So half the signature's on the plastic, half the signature. "I will never sell this." This is like the greatest thing. No, you cannot have it. And I've got like tons of cool stuff like that I really dig having.
So it's great to see. So you got books are coming in. You've sold multiple Action Ones, yet you're still geeking out to this stuff. Oh,
I have the Cosmic Cube from the first Captain America movie, and I hold it like Red Skull.
Is that how you get all the deals?
What's that?
Is that how you get all the deals with that?
Yes, I use it. Yes, I use this. And this I bought at an auction. I sat down. I was helping a client who was bidding on the Captain America costume that was in the auction. In the beginning, they had 4 Cosmic Cubes, and I like this one the best. This is the fake one that they get that the Red Skull goes to the Scandinavian church, and the priest gives it to him, and he crushes it and sends. He's like, all right, where's the real one? Well, this is the fake one. It has like this cloudy kind of look to it. The other ones were clear. And I was like, why do I want a clear one? I want this one. So I got it. Then I sat down with my friend, client, who wanted the costume, and I figured he'd get it for, I don't know, somewhere around 50 grand. I was sitting there like this, and he just kept bidding against some guy on the phone, and he ended up buying it for $255,000. And I remember all the years he and I would talk. He's like, yeah, I have it sitting in the crate that they delivered in. He never took it out, never put it on. I think maybe I'll get a mannequin, I'll put it on there. Hey, I just wanted to have it. It's like, wow, that's pretty cool. And I remember that guy, I sat down and talked to him, and I said, will you ever sell your collection? He's like, the only way I'll ever sell my collection is if I die. And I was like, well, you're a great guy. I hope that doesn't happen anytime soon. And then a few years later, he did die. And I was very sad. I went out to his memorial, and we all sat around for the whole day telling stories about this guy. And he was a very strange fellow, invented stuff. His parents had started a massive mail order company, and he and his siblings were loaded. Were very interesting people. And eventually, I was entrusted with bringing his collection to market. And amongst his books was an Action Comics #1, 8.5, and which I guess that was the second owner I sold that to. It's like, I think I've sold that book 3 or 4 times by now. Wow. So for 1.5, 1.75, I don't remember the third. 1.5, 1.75, and I think, 3. I think it's sold for $3 million. I think whatever it sold in that auction. I can't remember. Right? But wait, there's more to the story. So we do the auction, and the guy who we end up selling the Captain America costume. And I remember the siblings all like, "Oh, what a waste of money! I can't believe he bought this costume. I'm really lucky if it sells for 50 grand." And when I said that, I was like, "Oh, just kind of what I thought it was worth at the time." But all right, let's see what happens. So we put it in the auction. It ends up selling for $181,000. Just thrilled. So happy. They were happy. I was happy. Even though it was less, it was still great because what it sold for originally was a little crazy. I think, you had the 2 bidders, and neither one wanted to back down, which is great. That's what you want. So I call up my shipping department one day. I page them and I said, guys, I know you guys have to ship out the Captain America costume today, but do me a favor. When you take it off the mannequin, because it was on display in our office, please bring it by my office. So they bring it by. And I said, okay, I got to put this thing on. So I got the Captain America costume, and I'm going, wow, I have the same sized head as Chris Evans because it fit me perfectly. So I took pictures here in the office with the shield. We had the shield too. And I'm like, yeah, I had such a blast with that. It was just like one of the thrills of being Captain America's costume.
That's awesome.
So that was really fun. And I've got a million stories.
I'm curious. Who was the fan? Are you at liberty to say who the family was that you sold the collection, or?
I don't recall if we tagged everything with his name. So I'm going to right now say no, but I think there's a good chance we did have everything from the collection of, but just in case we didn't, I don't want to say anything right now. But it wasn't anybody would really know except for a handful of dealers. He was very private. And he bought from me and a couple of other dealers. And he and I had a really good rapport. Again, super interesting, super smart guy, really nice guy. I considered him a friend, and it was really sad to see him pass. Yeah.
Vince, I do want to ask a couple questions now regarding kind of, you've showed us a couple items like your Mike Tyson signed. When it comes to your personal collection, I'm assuming we're in your office right now.
Yeah.
So you're surrounded by a lot of original art there. Do you find more excitement in original art or in comic books, or
no? I love them. I love them both. This is one of my favorite pieces of art. It's the cover to Amazing Adventures #11, First Furry Beast.
I just traded that book.
Did you?
Yeah.
You idiot. Just kidding. So some of my favorite artists, three of my favorite artists are Gil Kane and Bill Everett, and that happens to be penciled by Gil Kane and inked by Bill Everett, and also Frank Frazetta. So very different artists, and I just love all of them for their various contributions and styles. I remember reading that comic book when I was a little kid, just losing my mind over it. And when I saw the cover come up for sale on eBay, I had heart palpitations for a week straight. It was insane. And finally, when the auction ended, there was about 10 seconds left, and my computer froze. My partner was online. He said, "You want me to bid on it?" I said, "Get it, get it." He put in like a bid, and I got it. I was so happy. It was just a really big thrill for me. I love that Bruce Lee signed contract is something that I really cherish. Comic book wise, my favorite character is Spider-Man. My favorite, I think I'd have to say my favorite comic book in my collection is my Amazing Fantasy 15 CGC graded 9.4.
Wow.
And I remember, so there's a great story behind that book. Oh, wow. I remember this, one of my first computers. It was awful. I don't even know how I got an email on this thing. It was probably 1997 or 1998, somewhere around there. And I get this email from a guy who's got an Amazing Fantasy 15. And I said, "Okay, can you do me a favor? Take photos of each quadrant of the front cover and send me the pictures so I can look at it in great detail." So he sends me the email, and I'm sitting there opening up the attachments with my dial-up. I think it was still on the dial-up mode. Yeah, we definitely were. So I look at this book, and I'm like, "Wow, that's a really nice book." And he sends me a list of what he has. I said, "Okay, I'll flab me." I flew up to Quebec, Canada, and I met this guy in the airport. Back then, you didn't need a ticket to get into the airport.
Yeah.
Different times, pre 9/11. So he brings a stack of Silver Age books, and the AR-15's there, and it's got, it's got a nice look to it, and everything's got a nice look to it. I'm like, "Where'd you get these books?" And he said, his uncle owned a newsstand, and he had the uncle's office was upstairs from the newsstand. And I have this I created a whole room and how like a little staircase that went up to this attic office with a big wooden table. And every time he liked a comic book, he would save one. And I like see him like slapping comic books. And some of the books had dust shadows on them because he didn't put them flat one on top of the other. Kind of mixed and dust settled. And so I bought the entire collection from him, and I was paying him in cash at the time, and we were in the bathroom stall of the Quebec airport, and I was basically counting out money and handing it to him under the stall. It was like very clandestine, kind of almost like a drug deal, but it was comic books. But everybody has their addiction, which is the next topic we're going to talk about. So I get back to New York. This is pre-CGC, and I call up a client of mine, and he said, "Hey, do you want to buy this?" And he says, "Yeah," and we negotiate a price. I said to him, "If you ever want to sell this, let me know, because I'd want to buy it back." And I think I sold it to him for $33,500. And that was, I think, 1998 or 19. I think it was 1998. And I wanted to keep the book at first, but I needed to build my business, and it was a nice chunk of change. And a couple of years later, he calls me up. He says, "Hey, do you want to buy that book back?" I was like, "Sure." He's like, "Well, I got it graded. It got graded a 9.4. I was like, "Wow, that's pretty cool. How much do you want?" And we negotiated price, and he was very nice about it, because at the time we had merged our companies and we were building our business, and I needed some time payments, and I paid him over a period of time. And interestingly enough, he said this to me, and this is a guy I'm still friends with to this day. He said to me, because when I owe somebody money, I want to pay them. So I called him up and I said, "Hey, I have another payment for you." He said, "In all the years I've been buying and selling comic books, and just in business in general, you're the only guy who's actually called me before I had to call them to pay me what they owed me." And I said, "Well, that's just how I was raised. I also didn't want to, screw up my opportunity here. And he had my deposit, so I didn't want to mess around either. But, it was just a matter of respect. Somebody's going to be nice enough to give me time payments. I'm going to be nice enough to pay them on time." So I bought that book, And probably a month after I bought it, there was a record sale, and it went up about, I think, 10 grand over what I had bought it for. And I was like, all right, okay, so that's pretty good. And I've held that comic book up until today. I still have it. And when I bought it, I said, this is my retirement book. When I'm ready to sell this, I'm ready to retire and I need money for something. If I do, or maybe I will never, I'll sell that book. But over the years, I've been able to accumulate some really fantastic books in my collection, not only for value, but just stuff that I was rare and that I loved. And so that's been really great. Before I jump into showing you guys some cool comic books, I mentioned the word addiction, and I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about me trying to continually challenge myself. And I have a comic book dealership, started an auction house, sold a TV show, tried to sell a video game. I co-founded Big Apple Conventions, the longest running New York comic book show in history. I think it's the longest run. It's over 20, maybe close to 27 years. 1996. What is that? Yeah, 27 years, right?
Yeah.
27 years it's been running. I'm not an owner in it anymore, but it's still running. But I was a co-founder of that. I also did the Show Must Go On show. Do you guys know about that?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so Fred Greenberg used to run Great Eastern Conventions in New York City. It was the big show. It was at the Javits. It was at the Metropolitan, the New York Coliseum, which was in Columbus Circle, where right now the Time Warner Center is. But it was this big convention hall. And so we were getting set to do our big show, and we drove into the city. And I remember we were waiting in line, and I see Fred Greenberg walking up to each car. And I'm like, what the hell is he doing? And he basically comes up and says, hey, listen, the show is canceled. I didn't get the floor plan approved by the fire marshal, and they shut me down. And I was like, holy crap, what are we going to do? So my buddy Mike Carbonaro and another guy named Vince Gula, we tried salvaging the show, trying to help Fred get the show back on track. Remember, he called one of his investors, and his investor had already, I think, put 180 grand into the show, and just said, I don't have any more money to put into the show. So what ends up happening? Fred can't put a show on. Mike says, I think I know a church that's nearby that has a big auditorium in the basement. And I go, what? Okay, we go for a ride over to the church, and we meet with the person who handles rentals. And it turns out St. Paul the Apostle Church Auditorium on 59th and 9th has a 10,000 square foot basement under the church. And they actually even have the, what do you call it? Like a mausoleum type of thing where they had
an undercroft.
Some of the priests were buried right like in this room, and it's just crazy. So the room cost us, I believe at the time, I want to say it was $2,400 or $2,800 for a one-day show. So we turned a 3-day Javits style show, or imagine New York Comic-Con style show for the 90s, into a one-day show in a 10,000 square foot basement. And we basically had to find every person we could, left and right, to get them to join us. And I remember we gave free admission. So to make everybody happy, we had to rent tables. It was snowing the day of the show. And I made more money at that show in one day than I had ever made at a convention before in my life. And what was even more important than making money or the joy of making the money was this. I don't know if you guys ever saw it. There used to be an old Toyota commercial where the slogan was, "Oh, what a feeling, Toyota."
Oh yeah, I remember.
You jump up in the air. I kind of did that jump that day. I was so happy and excited that we pulled off a convention in 48 hours, and really 24 hours, because it was basically Thursday afternoon, and we had basically all day Friday. And I remember Mike was up at 4 a.m. getting the tables into the convention, and the three of us ran this thing, collected table dues from all the dealers, had more artists in the room than dealers. It was incredible. And this is what launched Big Apple Conventions. It was called the Show Must Go On show, which I came up with both names, by the way. Big Apple probably a little bit better, but The show must go on. So
Awesome.
it was one of the most thrilling experiences of my life, and so that was another big challenge, running a convention. I also had a radio show. It was an internet radio show, not a podcast. It was on an actual internet radio station called World Talk Radio, and my show is called ComicZoneRadio.com, which is still up and live. You can still listen to tons of interviews I did with everybody from Frank Miller to Stan Lee to Thomas Jane, who played the Punisher, to Peter Singer, who was the director of Superman Returns, Dave
Brian Singer.
Brian Singer, thank you. And Peter Singer wrote a book called Animal Liberation, which actually got me into being a vegetarian, which lasted about 8 years. So that's why I thought Peter Singer. Peter Singer is one of the all-time greatest, in my opinion, modern-day philosophers. And if anybody's ever interested in becoming a vegetarian, read that book. If you're not interested in becoming a vegetarian, do not read that book. You can't read that book and not become a vegetarian. It's just impossible. So anyway, so I have the radio show for 5 years. I enjoy doing that. We end up getting, I get signed by CAA, and they're trying to sell a TV show about comic books, and it never actually happens. We tried really hard. We put a great pitch deck together, and a sizzle reel, not a pitch deck, sizzle reel together, and we came close, but we didn't. And then later on, we sold it as a show to History 2, but they changed the whole concept of the show, which was originally me and 3 other dealers. It was Chuck Rosansky from Mile High, Anthony Snyder from Anthony's Comics and Comic Art, and Mike Carbonaro from Big Apple Conventions and Comic Box Productions as frenemies who would compete against one another to buy deals. They changed it into something that was more historical based, where we went out and looked at deals and learned about it and brought up the historical relevance of the collectible, which was really fun, but it was totally different. And after we did a 20-minute presentation reel, they decided that they didn't like it. So we can close on that one. I've been on a whole host of other TV shows, news programs, all these different things, which I've really loved. And I'm not trying to just give you guys a resume or again, brag about anything. That's not the point. I'm getting to a point. And my point is, I love challenges. I love continuing to go forward. I can sell a comic book for $1 million. Why can't I sell a comic book for $2 million? Why can't I sell one for 3, for 4? This is the way my brain works. So in essence, what ends up happening is when I was in my mid-20s, I had a very existential, I wouldn't say crisis, but moment where I was trying to figure out, what am I doing on this planet? What am I here for? And I channeled that into a comic book character that I created called The Addiction. And The Addiction's power is from the slightest touch, the addiction can inject any type of drug into a person's body. The Addiction started off as a undercover narcotics cop named Nicholas Attino, and then morphed over the years into a female character named Nikki Tino. Nicotine, the Addiction. So, worked with my partner on the comic book. His name is David Quinn of horror comic book fame, Faust. Which is incredible. He worked on that with Tim Vigil and Aletha Martinez, who is an Eisner Award-winning artist at the time. This was in the mid '90s. And after, basically we shelved it and we never really did anything with it. And during the pandemic, we actually had a whole first issue done. I shouldn't say we didn't do anything, lettered and penciled. And during the pandemic, I was running my company with one other guy during the lockdown here in New York City, which was one of the craziest times of my life. I remember riding a bike with packages stacked to the FedEx store or to the post office to drop them because they wouldn't come to your building. And we had to keep the business running. So every day we're shipping out packages. Everybody else is working from home. It's me and was one other guy. And we did a great job, I think, all things considered. So I remember watching the news one night, and it's basically, they didn't know what was causing the pandemic. And if you touched the wrong thing and touched your face, you're going to die.
Yeah.
My heart was like this. I'm watching the news. I'm like, holy shit, I'm going to die. But I got to get these comic packages out. So I sat there thinking about, any day your number could be up. On the corner from my house where I live in Manhattan, there's a hospital. And next to the hospital was a refrigerated tractor trailer filled with dead bodies from the pandemic because they had no room in the morgues. and you're facing your mortality on a daily basis, and you're saying to yourself, shit, my number could be up any day now. And he said, I haven't done everything I want to do. I've always wanted to publish my very own comic book. And I said, you know, it could be a money-losing situation. I hate losing money. I'm a businessman, and I want to make things work. And I said, you know what? At this point in your life, you're doing all right. If you take a hit on this comic book, so be it. But now's the time. We're going to dust this thing off. We're going to revamp it, and we're going to come out with a new story. And I called up David Quinn, and I said, David, remember The Addiction? He said, yeah, I remember The Addiction. I said, I think we should start working on it again. I think we have an opportunity here. I think that with the experience you and I have gained over the last 15 years or whatever it was, I think we could do something really special with this. And he loved it. I was so excited that he was so excited, because David is an incredibly talented writer, creator. And we started working on it. We decided that this would be a passion project that we work on without such heavy like deadlines. We have to do it by this time. I said, no, we're going to enjoy ourselves. We did it very organically and created this. And then when we felt like we had a good script together and a good story for our first story arc, we found an artist, and we went through a lot of people who we asked to do the comic book, and finally got on the phone with, I'm sure you guys know who Elena Casagrande is, right? Elena Casagrande, she does Black Widow. She's an Eisner Award-winning artist. She's really talented. She's from Italy, and she says, "Hey, listen, I'm on my Marvel books. I don't have time to it. So, do you have a friend that you'd recommend?" And because sometimes that's a great way to go. And she said, "Yes, I want you to get in touch with my friend Claudia." So we get in touch with Claudia Balboni. She's from Rome, Italy, and we start telling her about the comic book, and we found our artist, and she's fantastic. She's fantastic. So we have 3 issues in the can. I've got cover artists working on the book. I found a guy in Florida I met at a little show, Miami Con, and he's incredible. His name is Labrada, and I think he's gonna be a superstar. Claudia also did a cover, which is unbelievable. I found another artist named Robot Cat. That's his name. That's his name. He's doing a cover for us. I also we have a cover from Aletha Martinez, who's again just a spectacular artist, and we just got David Mack on board. So it's a huge get for us, and I've been friends with David for probably close to 30 years, and we've gotten a lot closer over the last few months. And when I started telling him about the comic book and everything about it, he said, maybe I should do a cover for you. And I go, oh yeah, that would be thrilling, it'd be great. So we got him on board, and he's game. And we have a few other artists that we're working with who I think are fantastic, and some later announcements. But we're going to be premiering our comic book, or at least a New York Comic Con variant of it, in October at New York Comic Con. And we've got very, very interesting marketing hooks for this. We've got a digital deal in place. We've got cross-promotion and product placement in place. It's really exciting. And for me, it's a way to express myself creatively and also fulfill a childhood dream of mine. And I just think it's one of the greatest feelings in the world, just getting this far. I cannot wait to hold this comic book in my hand.
Yeah, that's awesome. Congratulations.
And by the way, if anybody ever tells you making a comic book is easy, it is.
They're full of shit.
Yeah. My phone is ringing right now. Listen, it's 10 o'clock here in New York.
Yeah, no, we don't. Yeah.
And my business line is ringing. Let's see, who is it? Oh, it stopped ringing. Oh, it's the wife.
You told her 10 o'clock. You said you'd be busy till 10.
Okay. Hold on a second. I'm finishing up. I'm finishing up the podcast. Wait. So, guys, I would love to show you a ton of cool books. I just have a couple things right here. I'll show you real quick. Here's a really cool AF-15 I just happen to have. Cool Barks.
Nice.
Reformed Schoolgirl. And notice that they're not in CGC holders. Weird Tales of the Batgirl cover. Let's see. Something else that's cool. Here's a cool book. First, this is the first, second appearance of Polaris, Origin of the Beast, 9.8. That's pretty cool.
That's pretty nice.
Really nice book. Let's see, and all these books we're pulling right now for San Diego Comic-Con, and Tomb of Dracula number 10, 9.4, X-Men 94, 9.4, and let me just see if I can.
Is that the one your brothers never had and you got it now at a 9.4?
Yeah, exactly. Let's see what else. X-Men 12, 9.4.
Oh, there's your X-Men 12.
X-Men 12, 9.4. Okay, what else we got here? Oh, these are orders. AF-15, 8.0.
Yeah.
Amazing Mystery Funnies, Centaur, 7.0. Spidey 1. Avengers 294. JLA, it's Brave and the Bold 2875. 98 Cap 100, that's pretty cool. Daredevil 296. And I got a lot of other cool stuff. So this stuff is all making its way out to the Comic-Con. Here's a tough book. First Silver Age Aquaman 9.2.
Wow.
Really cool. Showcase 30. Let's see. One more. There's some cool stuff. Marvel Mystery, San Francisco copy 9.2. Number 26, one of my favorite Marvel Mystery covers. Really cool cover. And this is really cool Mystery Men. Really cool stuff. 9.4. And this is Mile High copy, and also from the John Byrne collection. So many cool books, and we're just super excited to be going to the convention. Fantastic Four, number 290, FF1965, Sergeant Fury 90. Pretty cool.
You're blowing JP and I's brains here.
Yeah, listen, guys, I don't ever like take this for granted. I realize how cool the stuff I get to play with on a daily basis is. It's just like, if you ever told the 10-year-old me that this is what I'd be doing for a living, I never believe in a million years. It's really thrilling. It's fun. It's not easy to run a company. We have over, I think, somewhere around 20, 25 employees. Being a great comic book dealer does not make you a great business owner. You know, there's a lot of stuff you have to learn, or surround yourself with people who know what they're doing. And thankfully, I have a very strong team here and a very good business. And I'm just, I want to take a second just to sincerely, anybody out there we've ever met or done business, or you've consigned to me or bought from me or bid with me, I just want to thank you very much, because sincerely, without you guys, I'm not here doing this. If you guys don't want comic books and you don't love comic books and you're not buying comic books, I don't know what I'm doing. You know. So, and thank you both so much for allowing me to ramble on, sometimes incoherently, I'm sure.
No, excellent. Yeah, awesome to sit here and just listen.
It's been a blast, and I'd be happy to come back again anytime you guys want. You guys asked some great questions. JP, you really talk way too much. I don't know. So thank you both very much for having me. I really
this has been an absolute treat having you on and just listening to these stories. We'll definitely want to have you back on again and hear more.
Like we said, an hour, and we go an hour and a half. We just love to talk or listen to somebody talk. So
and I would have kept going. I got 4 boxes here filled with books.
Yeah.
I got to show you every single one of them. Preview for San Diego Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So, but before my wife kills me, I'm going to sign off and thank you both very much.
Yes.
And I've got to be up at 6 in the morning because I got to hit the gym tomorrow and try to.
Hey, I'm up at 5, hitting the gym as well. So.
All right, cool. That's great, guys. Thank you very much, sincerely. Thank you.
Vince, thank you.
Thank you so much, Vince.
All right. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next podcast. Take care, everybody.
Right.